Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to Points of View on Teachers Talk Radio with myself, Liz, Carl, Ray and Lucy. This morning we are talking about quite a hot topic in education generally, in the country generally, which affects young people, and it will naturally feed into schools. So we thought we'd talk about it this morning. So the House of Lords is back to move to ban under-16s in the UK from social media platforms. By 261 votes to 150, opposition peers voted to support a ban through an amendment to the government's schools bill. The government, however, has indicated it will try to overturn the amendment in the Commons whilst it holds its own consultation on a potential ban. What are everyone's thoughts on this move? It's really gained momentum this week. We feel like we've been talking about something similar for a while, but all of a sudden it feels quite serious and impending and quick.
Well, I mean, I'm always happy to start. So I support this wholeheartedly. My children are all adults now. I've said before on this show, I've got two sons, 27 and 24, and a 19-year-old daughter. And they refer to her as the iPad generation. And she wasn't even in the thick of it, if you see what I mean, because it's the kids now that are the real iPad generation. You know, from the time they're in their pushchairs and prams, they've got a screen in front of them. And I do understand it when you're out and about and you need to get on with things. I do understand that temptation, but we know that children are picking up books in classrooms at school and trying to swipe them and things because they don't know what books are. And this, of course, leads on to the next thing and the next thing. And so children are getting social media younger and younger. They're getting around all the controls in terms of you have to be 13. I think one of my sons might be celebrating something like his 30th birthday now because he signed up before he was at the right age. And so he's now about 30 when he's actually not, because all you had to do is type in your name. The difference is back then when they were looking into it, there was no algorithm, it was just what somebody else posted that you read. And we know now that it's completely different. And it's the algorithms have been deliberately designed to make this addictive. And what they do is they start off with something. So say if you look at, I'm trying to pick a topic that's not within children, but say if it's looking at celebrities and how they look, and it transgresses to how they become so thin, what treatments are they getting, what diet are they eating, how did they lose so much weight for it? And before you know it, those kids have been shown and introduced to concepts of weight, of vanity, of appearance, and given a false impression of how they should look. And you can see it in classrooms, you can see it amongst young girls in particular, but even young boys, you know, girls who are I remember a student of mine used to get up at 5 a.m. and she was so tired because she had to put her makeup on and she had the kind of stuff that you would put on for a once in a year party. You know, this was your regular daily look in case someone took a photo. And it's damaging children. It's causing them harm because at the other end of the day, she would have been sat there the night before scrolling because there's another video or there's another article, or there's something else and it's quick and it comes up, and it's taking young people's opportunity to get lost in their own world because they're being shown into other worlds. And so for that reason, I entirely support this ban. It's no good for young people's mental health. If I had my own way, I'm an avid user of Twitter. I'm on there typing stuff in and, you know, posting stuff all the time. I couldn't give it up. But I wish it never started. I wish I'd never joined. And I haven't joined other than Facebook. I've got Instagram, but I won't use it. And I won't use any other. I won't go onto TikTok or any of it now because I just feel it's like a Pandora's box. And once you've opened it, it's just so hard to get out. And I'm an adult.
Fully agree. I mean, I love that you said that it's taking their opportunity to get lost in their own world away. Because I think there are two main issues. There's the content of social media, which is damaging. And then that splits off. There's the actual damaging content that they're being exposed to that they shouldn't. It's the way that it influences their views of themselves and the world around them. There's the addiction element of it and the dopamine kicks and the fact that these apps are engineered to manipulate that and take advantage of it. But then there's the opportunity cost of social media. If they're scrolling TikTok, they're not outside, they're not socializing in the real world. It takes away so much of what is so important at a crucial developmental stage. Like these young people have to learn how to engage face to face socially with individuals and groups and people in different places. And if you're online, like you're not doing any of those things. And so many people, like I am on Facebook because I'm old. And a lot of
Well, if you're old, Ray, then it doesn't leave a lot of hope for me.
I'll ask my students, the first to tell you, yeah, miss, you look like you'd be on Facebook. Well, I am. I'm in a lot of local Facebook groups because I think they're hilarious. Like sometimes they're useful, right? Sometimes it's useful information for the community, but 90% of the time it's just hysterics. I scroll these local Facebook groups because it's so funny. It's the conversations and anyway, it's a laugh. But a lot of the posts on these local Facebook groups where old people are complaining about things is, so many there was a group of youths outside and these boys in the park and and like, yeah, sometimes they're actually doing things that they shouldn't be doing, but I love it. I love, like, when I'm walking around, and maybe this is because I work in a secondary school and I'm not scared of teenagers, but when I'm walking around and I see groups of young people, no matter what they look like, what they're wearing, etc., just outside or BMXing in the park or hanging around on a corner and talking to each other, I'm so happy about that. If they don't have their phones in their hand when they're congregating and socializing, I'm like, yes, that's a win, because you see it so much less often now than you did 10, 15 years ago. Like, I first got here in 2010, so that's kind of my only point of reference for this country. But it feels rare that you see a group of youths loitering outside without phones in their hand. I don't give a monkey's what they're loitering, as long as they don't have their phones and they're not scrolling. I'm like, great, cool, you're being teenagers. And there's all this data now about, and I'm about to say something that's probably going to get me in real trouble as a teacher, but why stop now? There's so much data saying that, like, teenage drug use and teenage alcohol use is plummeting. And I'm like, that's because they're not getting drunk in a field with their friends. Like, what's the point of being a teenager in this country if you can't get pissed in a field with your friends? Isn't that the point of being a teenager in the UK? So these kids are not, so there are benefits of it, I guess. But at the same time, I'm like, you're missing valuable, not to say every 15-year-old needs to go to the park with a bottle of wine, but for God's sake, please go outside, please socialize, please make real life questionable decisions, please learn, please grow, please have these experiences that we all had when we were young, because it's part of growing up. And I just feel like so many things are being taken away from them, the good and the bad, because of their phone addictions, and they just want to sit in their house and scroll. But I'm going to keep talking and then I will shut up, I promise. The other side of this, right? It's not just the social media. It's the parenting and the parenting. Like, I will always come back to the parents, and I'm not even talking about the parents not monitoring their social media use or their screen use. I'm talking about the culture of parents helicoptering and micromanaging and feeling that they need to know where their kid is every second of every day and not allowing them out of their sight. And not see, what we actually have in this country is a mixture of social media and screen addiction, which is warping our brains. Every study shows that. And the younger you are, the worse it is. And combined with that, we have a culture of, like, parents see themselves at the center of this panopticon where they have to monitor all of their children constantly, and they're absolutely terrified of giving their kids any kind of freedom. So no, they're not getting pissed in a park because they're on TikTok, but also their parents never let them out of their sight anyway. So they don't have any freedom. They don't have any ability to learn and grow on their own and develop any kind of independence. They're literally trapped in their houses in the room. So these two things feed off each other, right? Parents look at social media and they get scared of the world. So they lock their kids in their house. Kids get locked in their house. They spend more time on social media. And it's just like the whole thing just snowballs. And then you have these kids that come to school and they don't know how to function with other people their own age. They don't know how to problem solve. They don't know how to resolve conflicts. They haven't developed any sort of social skills, because the only time they're in a social environment is when they're in school, monitored by staff who are also there's increased pressure on staff to monitor kids every second of every day because of safeguarding. So they're never out of sight. They're never allowed to just exist and learn themselves. They're never let off the lead. So that's
Can I
my
ask
thought
a
on it. The whole
question,
thing's messed
Ray?
up.
Can I ask a question? There is an
Yeah.
argument out there that allowing young people to explore social media whilst they're still at school enables school to support them to learn how to negotiate that risk. So there was an article recently in the TES which made this point, that it's the only place where young people could negotiate the world of social media, but also have the support of responsible adults that will give them advice and guidance to understand how to use it in a responsible way. How would you respond to that argument?
Well,
That's not our
I've got
job.
a view on that there is one teacher roughly to 30 students in a school. There's got to break down to something like that. How many of those students are going to reach out? They're probably the ones who are asking for a second opinion, having spoken to their parents, not the children who have no one to speak to and aren't used to speaking to anybody and don't trust other people, i.e. teachers. So I read that article and none of it gelled. I genuinely, I felt as though the writer had been told, could you write an alternative view on this? Because nobody seems to be able to come up with a reason for young people to be on social media, and he's thought, good grief, the most tenuous link is that teachers can guide them through it, because very few young people are going to a teacher and saying, I just wonder, should I stop looking before I see something I shouldn't? They're just not doing that. So for me, no, I don't think schools are the place to do that. And let's not forget that young people are supposed to be in school, education, or some sort of training or employment until they're 18. So if they get it at 16, they're still going to be in an environment where if that really was something they needed, they could access it. And I'll stop there.
I find that a really, like you say, Lucy, I find it quite tenuous, because obviously we teach about a lot of things like drug use, alcohol use, things like that. We're not encouraging them to go out and use it in order to find out whether or not it's good for, so I don't think they need to use social media for us to be able to teach them about the dangers of those things. It's do you know what, it isn't even just the social elements of it, I think, that are problematic. I think it has absolutely changed their brain chemistry and the way that they learn. Like for us in education, I saw a video on social media, ironically, about it this week, about effectively the dumbing down of education and what has happened as a result, because we're dealing with young people who deal with everything in such bite-sized chunks, because the longest video that they're looking at quite often is a minute long, 60 seconds. And so their attention spans have become so low. And I did an activity with my year 11s last week, and it was a 10-minute activity, which I think is a reasonable chunk of time, like to chunk down some learning. So it was a 10-minute activity. Right, this is a task, explained it, set them off. I did not have them on task for 10 minutes. They were gone within 90 seconds. And so I spoke to one of my colleagues and she suggested chunking it down even further. So what I did was I broke it down, and I broke this. So it was annotation of a poem. And so I broke it down into 30 seconds, look at the title, 90 seconds, consider the context, 2 minutes, look at the first stanza, 2 minutes, look at the second stanza. They did stay on task better, but I was like, what have I done?
The exam's an hour and 45 minutes. The exam is an hour and 45 minutes.
It's
2 hours and 15, one of them. 2 hours and 15. We can't do
insane.
this.
It's absolutely insane. And it makes me understand why they say everything's boring, because they're not getting the dopamine hit from us, because we're asking for too much of their attention for too long. So it obviously, like, I'm not minimizing any of the absolutely catastrophic effects on depression, like mental health. Like, we've got the highest levels of mental health issues among young people that we've ever had. Of course, social media is playing an absolutely massive part in that. But they also are seeing school as this absolutely horrendous place that they're suffering because they're not getting their dopamine hits because of what social media has done to their brain chemistry. But what really frustrates me is, and I do agree with you, Ray, I do think it does start at home. I think as parents, I mean, the irony of this is that I'm keeping my child occupied on a screen right now while I'm doing this show. I will take it away after it's over, I promise.
There's a time and a place, it's fine.
And but why is nobody cracking down on the companies that are actually the ones creating this problem? Like, nobody's regulating them. Nobody's making sure that they are not pushing this harmful content onto young people. There was a family, wasn't there, of the young girl who took her life, who was suing Instagram, I think, because they blamed the company for pushing like the suicide ideation.
It was Molly Russell, I think, is the case, isn't it?
Yes, I think that was it, Carl. And I agree with that family. I understand why they blame social media for that, because what was the documentary with Matt and Emma Willis, where I think they joined fresh, they said that they were young people, and I think it was within half an hour in their algorithm was suicide ideation. Like, even though they hadn't looked at anything remotely linked to that, it was still pushed into their algorithm and they were being fed information on that. And you just think it is so dangerous as a medium. I fully support a ban.
What about those who say that social media is a lifesaver for young people who would otherwise feel completely isolated from their peer group? Young people who suffer from social anxiety, young people who have various mental health conditions, which mean that social media is their only means of escaping from what is otherwise a particularly cold and unfeeling world, and it acts as a prop to keep them connected to people who are feeling similar to themselves or able to support them. What about that argument? Because I've come across people who fiercely defend social media for under 16 on the grounds that their child went through a period like this, and social media was in their words a bit of a lifesaver.
I get that, and I also, sorry, Lisa.
No, you go.
I promise. I get that, and I also get, I've taught a number of students. I was a head of year for 8 years, so I know I've spoken to a lot of students about this outside of the classroom. I've taught a lot of students, particularly queer students, LGBT students, who grew up in extremely rigid or conservative with a small c, or unwelcoming, unaccepting homes. And if it weren't for social media and connecting with people and realizing that there was actually hope and there was a world out there where they could be themselves and be happy, and they just needed to get there, they would have been in a very dark place or worse. I'm well aware that for some students, particularly if their daily lives are extremely difficult, social media can absolutely be a lifeline, and it can connect everybody, including young people, to information that's valuable, individuals that's valuable. It can give them a wider worldview. It can kind of get them out of their lives in a good way. But I think we have to look at the numbers, and I think we have to look at the overall impact, and I think we have to try to make decisions based on the biggest picture. And that sounds really horrible. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that a ban for under-16s would take that lifeline away from some students. So maybe there's some compromise or some nuance that needs to be looked into. However, I feel like there are bigger issues, and the rewiring of our brains and the impact that is having on our ability to function, I feel needs to take priority right now.
So I want to come back on that in a second, Carl, because it's a really good question. But I just want to talk to you about Hachette Learning, because this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools across the world. Level up your professional development today, and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. And then also, Teachers Talk Connect is back. It's our annual CPD and networking extravaganza. Join the TTR team on Saturday, the 14th of March in Manchester. Tickets are free. What are you waiting for? Head over to ttradio.org /connect 2026. And I'll be really brief on that. The question that you posed about young people who might be in living in isolation because of their sort of, issues, their social anxieties and things like that. And I just wanted to say, before we look at Neil's comment, I just wanted to say that those children are probably some of the most vulnerable children in our society, and probably the children we most need to protect in some ways from the harms of social media, because if they're struggling with communications in the real world, then probably going online, they're more open to manipulation. There's a very creepy person on social media, I don't know what site, but I see from time to time, who says their friend, I'm your friend. Don't forget, I'm your friend, and I'm here for you, and you don't have to talk to your parents because it's really creepy. And yet I can see how for some young people, they would really buy into it. I mean, I was talking to my son last night about rabbit holes I went down in terms of books. I read a book called The Borrables, a series of books, and these kids had run away from home and they lived in sheds and garages, and I wanted to sleep in our garage. I mean, when young people, they I did anyway, completely immerse themselves in things. And so that would really concern me. I didn't know if somebody wanted to respond to Neil's comment, because I think it's quite a pertinent comment, to be fair. Has anyone got anything?
Well,
I'll
it's-
happily take it, because
Hold on, let's read it.
Read it. Saying.
If people are listening, Neil has said, if teachers do not respond to the child that's in front of them, for example, their attention span, then they are fighting a losing fight from the start. The problem is that by doing that, we are actually colluding with the lack of attention span. Neil's comment.
I think that's a fair comment. I think that's true. But how do we break the cycle? It's really, really difficult, isn't it?
Well-
Because
This show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Hey teachers, it's Tom here from Teachers Talk Radio, just dropping in to tell you about Teachers Talk Connect 2026. We are back with our amazing big annual CPD and networking extravaganza in Manchester. It's on Saturday, the 14th of March, and tickets are completely free for teachers. Just head over to ttradio.org/Connect 2026 to grab your ticket today. We can't wait to see you there.
No, I mean, he's added something there. Social media marijuana can relieve anxiety, Carl, but that doesn't make it good for teenagers. We keep making the mistake that we think a phone is harmless. Just to be clear, I'm not necessarily saying that these are my views, putting forward views that I've heard, because I think it's important that in this discussion we address those points of view as well. I just want to throw in something. Sorry, Liz, I'll be very quick. I promise
right.
you. When I was young, back in the Jurassic period, we had a lot of people saying very similar things about people watching television. And me, and probably most young people of my age when I was about sort of 11 or 12, would get up of a Saturday morning and invariably sit and watch TV, unless there was anything interesting happening otherwise. We'd sit and watch TV from sort of like 10 o'clock in the morning through to possibly early evening, and then our parents would come and watch a bit of TV. Could be watching TV for 10, 12 hours a day. And the argument that was thrown forward routinely was young people's attention spans have dropped considerably. It's affecting their ability. They've got square eyes. They can't possibly focus on the world. And in fact, what's happened is that, to the best of my knowledge, my eyes aren't square. So I'm just putting the argument that some people may say that this is just another classic rehash of middle-aged moral panic, because they're a bit frightened about the things that in the modern world are happening. And whereas they used to moan about TV and punk rockers, now it's people on social media and algorithms. What do you think about that viewpoint?
I feel, right. So I hate sounding like some old part who hates everything new and young. And I really, really, really like, my life goal is to just not turn into an old person. I don't know, whatever. I hate it. And I hate hearing myself say things that, my parents used to say when I was a kid, or I hear my grandparents. Like, I hate it coming out of my mouth. But I don't hate this, because all of the data supports exactly what we're saying. All of the studies that have been done have shown just how much social media and constant screen time is affecting our brains, and it is affecting our attention span. It is affecting our ability to engage with people. It is affecting our social and problem solving abilities. Like, everything shows this. There is no, like, this is literally different because we've proven that it's different. And I understand 10, 15 years ago, I remember my first couple of years of teaching, and all the older teachers were lamenting the phone use and whatever. And I thought, like, no, I get why they shouldn't be in schools. I get that, but you can't, like, times are changing. The world is changing. Technology is changing. Embrace it. Oh, wow, this is great. You can communicate with people in China. I thought it was a good thing. And the internet in general is a good thing, but we didn't have the data yet. And I hadn't seen the regression across the past 15 years of my own students and their ability to focus on anything. I hadn't seen it 15 years isn't long term, but you know what I mean? I hadn't witnessed it, and we didn't have the data yet. And now we do. So this is different. This is literally different from television. This is literally different, even from video games, which are notorious for dopamine addicted people as well. It's even worse than that. And everything proves it. So I'm gonna sound like a complaining boomer, and that's fine, because it is different, and we know it's different. So we have to do something. Otherwise, we are in so much trouble. We are cooked,
But also,
as they'd say.
Television is produced and edited. It has to go through quality control, certainly used to. And so, what we were being fed was one directional. We absorbed it, but we were, good grief, Carl, you're probably a similar age to me. When we were children, we were watching these adverts where a group of children were pulling a little dinghy with a sail across a rugged field. Then it hits the power lines, and they all die. A little girl who picked up a sparkler in her glove, and then her hands all burned. Like, we were shown some terrifying stuff that genuinely has made, so it's not as if, we weren't given messaging or important information, because we were. But the thing is, we were told it, we chose to listen or not, and invariably we just did because the telly said, and so you will die if you touch a sparkler. It's as simple as that. But, so we learned stuff from it in the same way that we might say we young people learn things from social media, but we couldn't interact back, and it couldn't morph the message into something different. The more somebody watched it, the more it gained traction or interest. And so it was you're right. I remember the square eyes, sitting too close to the television. It's bad for you. All of these things, I remember it well. But it was a one-dimensional thing. You watched the telly, and then you turned it and you got told. Good grief, I got told off having my head in a book. You get your head out that book, go outside and do something, And talking of books, I've got my diaries from when I was 13 years old, and I was reading Wuthering Heights. So I've got in there Poldark, Wuthering Heights, all these books. And I'm not kidding, I've got Wuthering Heights, and I've tried to sit down and read it, and even I don't have the attention span to read it now, and I'm ashamed of myself for that. I can't believe it. And Liz, your point about the teaching and breaking it down into really small chunks, okay? It's like, if you're training for a marathon, you don't run 26 miles on the same day. And if we want to get them back to having some kind of attention span, I used to say to my daughter, none of my kids read, but my daughter in particular never, ever has liked reading. And I said, just 5 minutes a day. And then you've got to put the book down after 5 minutes, and then you'll be cross because you wanted to read more, but that will bring it. But no, she hasn't even tried. It's just gone. So much of those skills and that interest has gone because it's been replaced by a phone and a laptop.
But this is what upsets me about the schools. Like, you actually have people out there who are advocating for schools to change their entire approach and for teaching to change and to accommodate And I think this is what Neil was saying, to accommodate the shrunken attention spans and just embrace that somehow, as if we don't have a professional duty to prepare these students for the exams that everybody has to take, whether you like it or I hate them. I think the system's ridiculous, but I want my students to be as prepared as they can be, because the exam grades open doors for the future. And that is literally my job. So I'm not going to reduce everything to 90-second chunks. If you're training for a marathon, you don't run for 90 seconds and stop, and then on the day show up and expect to run 26. So you have to build them up. We have to fight against this. We have to increase their focus again. But the more these students become addicted, the more time these young people spend on their phones and on social media in particular, the harder and harder and harder that gets. And the less and less likely it is that they're going to eventually, by the end of year 11, get to a point where they can reach their potential and get the grades they're capable of getting and have the most doors open for them for their future options. It starts so young, and we cannot be like people who sit there saying times have changed, school hasn't changed since the Victorian time. Okay. And the school is not the problem here. There are a lot of things wrong with the education system, I'll be the first to say. But expecting kids to focus for more than 90 seconds at a time or sit still at a desk is not one of them at all.
Liz, I jumped in a little bit earlier and you were just about to start something. I just want to give you the chance.
Perimenopausal brain means I cannot remember at all what it is that I was going to say. I do wonder if it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation with the kind of the social anxiety. And I don't know whether it's the social media that has effectively started that social anxiety, and then by this kind of self-medicating with social media, if it's this just perpetual thing. I mean, I've had emails sent to me about students' comfort and coping strategies being scrolling social media. Like they find comfort in that. They find that constant scroll makes them feel better. And while I understand that it's important for us to help young people, would we advise, if midweek glass of wine helped a 14-year-old cope with their social anxiety, would we suggest that they did that? No, we wouldn't. So scrolling social media feels a little bit like we are perpetuating the problem. And if we are going to say, okay, they find their comfort in social media, it keeps them connected with the world around them, isn't that more argument for regulating the companies in the first place, so that the content that then is being pushed to young people is healthy, supportive, not kind of this brainwashing nonsense, filth, whatever it is, filth. Gosh, how old am I?
Mary?
Oh, Liz, I've got the surname for words like that, not you.
Just make it healthy content, for goodness sake. I just feel so sorry for young people now growing up in this environment where they already, like, the very condition of being a teenager means that you don't know who you are and you really struggle to find out who you are. And your peer group is enough of a pressure in that circumstance of trying to work out who you are. Then when you add this other dimension of what people on social media who you see for 60 seconds are telling you what you should be as well, just not knowing who you are or how to be without everybody else, it's so difficult. Like I would not want to go back now and be 15 and live the life that they live.
Be 15 now. Yeah.
Yeah. I could. I'd love to go back and be 15 in the 90s. Top notch. Because we didn't have these pressures. It wasn't the same. It wasn't like this. And I think we're looking at the wrong solutions. I think this is the only solution that I think we actually reasonably will do, because no one's going to regulate the companies. They are going to be allowed to carry on and do what, because that's just the way that it is, because they just have such a monopoly over the market. We're not going to interfere with that. So we have to take whatever strategies we can to do it. And I think I agree, parents do have a part to play in it, but I think it needs to be bigger. I think it's got to be.
On the topic of being bigger, you know what I said before about the content being the issue, but also the opportunity cost of, if they're on their phone, they're not doing something else. I think we need investment in third spaces for young people. Like where are they supposed to go? Okay, so yes, we want them outside, but ideally, right? There's more to do than just hang around on a street corner. Like there's a park by my house where kids BMX and kick a ball around and stuff, and you see them wandering around, and that's great. That's wonderful. Not everybody lives next to a park like that. There are so few spaces where teenagers can go and hang out and exist without spending exorbitant amounts of money that most of them don't have, that are relatively safe and clean. If you live in a large city in particular, in a tower block, you probably don't have a garden. You don't have one of those spaces nearby. Where are young people meant to go? I grew up on an island where there wasn't anything to do. You could go to the beach, which I couldn't do because I got migraines from the sunlight. You could go to the cinema, which gets really boring if there's nothing out that you want to see. You could walk around a horrible mall. And expensive. A lot of people didn't have money for that. Or if you could see over the bar, at a bar, they would serve you. So what you had was people from the age of about 14 going out drinking in clubs that they had absolutely no business in, were incredibly dangerous, getting up to all sorts. That was not, and that was just the culture. Like that was just what people did. And obviously that's not an option. That shouldn't be an option. So I know what it's like to be a teenager and be like, I want to do, like, I don't want to be at home. I want to go out with my friends, but there's nothing to do except get up to trouble. And that's part of the reason it just comes back. It just feeds back on itself. There's nowhere to go. So they stay inside as well.
Can I raise 2 points just because I think it's important that at some point they're aired, not that again, they're necessarily my point of view. One is the accusation of bad science. There's a lot of what I've heard, and I'm not an expert in these matters, but what I've heard is there's a lot of bad science involved in discussions about this issue, and much of it that has been replicated by Jonathan Haidt in his best-selling book, The Anxious Generation. For example, we all use, and I'm as guilty as anybody, of the phrase dopamine hit. Apparently there is no such thing. Dopamine does not spike when you are in it's a phrase that's been injected into popular understanding because it helps us to understand a feeling or a concept that we have. But actually, that's not how the brain works. Dopamine does not spike when we have a pleasurable experience in that way. That's my understanding from science. And similarly, there is an idea that's thrown around that young people's brains are plastic insofar as they're very malleable, they're growing, they're developing, they're still shaping in lots of different ways. And consequently, their brains are at a particularly vulnerable stage of development, and the exposure to things like social media can warp that development in a manner that then can be difficult to undo when they're older. But I've heard, and again, I am very welcome to be put right on this, but I've heard there's no real evidence that's actually true. There's any proper science behind that. And that a lot of the studies into the impact of social media, one, are very short term because, of course, it's not been around that long. Two, they're on very short samples, small samples. So it's very difficult to extrapolate beyond that. And three, that when you try to analyze something like this, you have to untangle it from so many other factors that in the end, any causal connection is almost impossible to prove. So what about those people that argue that the science here is actually not backing up and the studies are not really backing up what people say? This is basically us saying, or society saying, we don't like this. It doesn't look or feel good to us. So we're going to use some quasi-science to just back it up. What would people say in response to that view?
Okay, so if we say that the science doesn't provide us enough evidence that it's causing harm, what is causing harm and it cannot be denied that it would cause harm, is young people seeing ideologies in terms of size, appearance, seeing pornography, being exposed to things that they shouldn't see. Now, maybe that causes no harm whatsoever, but I very much doubt it somehow. So even if the science isn't there, just the algorithms and how they work is leading children to see things that they shouldn't see. So even if it's not causing harm, and I would argue every day of the week that it is causing harm, and that the science not being able to entirely substantiate that due to there's not been enough time, yet social media is still relatively new in the sort of whole evolution of humans, etc. But we are seeing evidence in our own eyes and ears. And the problem is, you can say we should leave it up to the parents. It's up to parents to decide if they want their children to go on social media. And if they don't, then they can take control of that. And it's just not so straightforward. And so I feel like somebody does have to step in. And just in case it's harmful, just in case it's not good for them, I would still support banning it. I personally wonder who is questioning the science and whether they have some involvement in either pushing their own narratives through social media, or if they work in the tech industry. Because let's not forget that all of the people who've created these things, I think there's a person. My husband read a book called Stolen Focus. Now, I haven't read it yet, but he said it's fantastic and I must read it. And in that, he talks about how, even as an adult, when social media was taken away from him, he went to a cabin or something somewhere, he was unable, it took him a long time to deal with not having something to reach for, something to look at. Do you see what I mean? And I think anybody who is living like that, I do it. First thing I do in the morning is pick up my phone, and I tell myself I want to see what the time is, but I haven't bought myself a clock radio or something that would tell me without picking up my phone, because I know that that's where I'm going to go to. If I had a clock on my wall, I would look at my clock and then I would pick up my phone. So really, we have become slaves to it. It buzzes, I pick it up if I'm available. The only thing with me is I am able to go for long periods of time without checking in on social media if I'm doing something, and I can live with that mostly. But yeah, I don't care for the anti-science argument until science turns around and says, do you know what? We have looked at this and there is no evidence that it causes harm. Then I think we have to probably run along the lines that it does. I think that we are safer protecting children from an unknown than assuming that we're probably right and it's probably okay. And while I've got the conch, as we call it, may I just tell you again about Hachette Learning, because this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles.
Okay. Anthony's got a good point. He says, presumably... Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, presumably young people, this is Anthony, presumably young people can still correspond with their friends via text-based services or chats via online games. If that's the case, I don't believe banning social media is a big deal. And that raises the whole question of what is social media? How do you define it? How do you define what the platforms are that you would ban? Sorry.
No, I was just going to read Anthony's comment and say that's fair enough. One of the biggest pushbacks we have about, going schools banning phones and going phone free, like put them in a box or in a bag or something at the beginning of the day. Parents, I need to contact my child. Brick phones exist. Get a 10-pound one from Tesco. Problem solved. What did parents do before they could track with a little blue dot their kid walking on the way home from school? And by the same token, what did parents do who are struggling to keep roofs over their heads and going to work all the time and not spending time monitoring their kids? What did parents do to parent before they could just hand a screen to their children? Like, people who make excuses saying, oh, parents need to know where their kid is every second of the day. We had 2,000 years without that just recently. Parents can't manage having to work 2 jobs because the cost of living, and they don't have books in the house, and they, sometimes they're really, really struggling. Cool. So have thousands of generations of human beings before they had screens to put their kids in front of. How did people cope? That poverty isn't new. Struggling isn't new. Parenting isn't new. They're literally all just excuses. You do not need to have a phone, a smartphone. Your child does not need access to a smartphone 24/7 for them to be safe or you to parent properly. You do not need to put your kid in front of a screen to do your job as a parent. And if people are just making excuses and excuses and excuses, I'm so far beyond not interested to listen to them. Like, I don't understand why we're giving those views any time or any energy. It really comes back to, this is a new technological development. Human beings have coped before. It's not necessarily making your life any better. You don't actually need to use it. Please stop using it as an excuse and do your job as a parent, because the parents, they ain't parenting. And it's coming back on the government to make regulations, the companies to sort out their horrible stuff, which they probably should do anyway because it's vile. And there's another word for you. It's coming back on the schools to manage a problem that is starting at home because the parents ain't parenting. So again, yeah, get your kid a brick phone. They don't need social media. You don't need to track them. You really, really don't. But the schools that are taking the approach of, yeah, sure, you can have an iPhone, you can have an Android, great. Put it in this bag at the beginning of the day and check it out at the end. And then you can have it on the way to and from school. Like, I don't that's the best of all worlds, surely. I don't understand why there's still pushback, because you're going to have medical exemptions. My sister's diabetic. She has an app on her phone that monitors her sugars. It sends her alerts. I have diabetic students who have the same thing. Obviously, they'll be allowed. Okay. People who need their phone for an actual, they have to for their physical health, they will be allowed to. We're not going to endanger.
But that's not social media. So you can have a smartphone, and by banning social media for under-18s, under-16s, sorry, you can go into a supermarket when you're 7 and you can buy things if you've got £5 in your hand, but you can't buy a can of beer or a lager. So you can be in a world, but not access all of the world in it. And that's such a good point about, some kids needing to have their phones to monitor blood sugars and things. The smartphone issue, the phones in school issue, would be lessened enormously by not having social media access until they're older. Actually, a thing that I have a problem with and I have a solution to is the access to social media at 16, on your 16th birthday, because I'm an August birthday kind of person. So I would have been the last person. Everyone would have left school and I still wouldn't have been able to connect on social media. And I didn't resent, but I always felt the time of year my birthday was, because I had August the 3rd for presents and cards and things. But on August the 3rd, I turned 16 and I was chuffed to bits, or 15, say. We went to school, and on the first day, there were already 2 or 3 people having their 16th birthdays, and it drove me mad. I hated it. So the idea that you've then got kids all throughout the year going, yay, I've got whatever the latest social media is, and other kids who are still excluded, not to mention, I would probably do better in my GCSEs if I tried hard, obviously, but I would probably do better because I wouldn't have the distraction of this new shiny social media thing that's just come into my world, the same as the September birthdays and the October birthdays, etc., because I wouldn't have those distractions. And so my solution is not when you're 16, but when you finish year 11. And I would tie it in with, when HMRC send your national insurance code, they are able to identify every person in this country who turns 16 in the following year, because it comes when you're about 15. And so what my solution would be is that in the end of June or whatever, after all the GCSEs are over, HMRC sends a code. They can send it electronically, and you have to use that code to input all the social media sites to be able to access them. That way, everyone gets it at the same time. Nobody in year 11 is on social media whatsoever, so they can concentrate on their exams. And then when they go to sixth form, if they're going to be stupid and prioritize social media over their A levels, then surely that's what we're doing anyway, is sorting out who is right to go to university and who isn't. Do you get what I mean? I wasn't.
Actually make it dependent on the exam results.
No.
No.
I just
Get it?
Like when they leave the end of year 11, and then it's the same time. Because I was thinking that too. If you make it 16, you're just going to have like all the younger kids in that year. It's going to be so excruciatingly horrible, and you don't get rid of the problem in year 11 anyway. So yeah.
One of the things that's nice about the idea of a social media ban for me as a head teacher is that one of the issues about banning smartphones from schools is that actually, on the whole, the problem that young people experience is not one that they experience in schools. There are very, very few schools where young people are regularly using phones these days. I mean, there are different ways in which schools achieve it, and there are all sorts of issues about that. But there are very few schools where, young people have unfettered access to phones. But of course, the moment they walk out the door, they do have unfettered access. And at that point, all manner of things happen, which then do have a knock-on effect in schools. So the idea of social media, a ban on social media, has an appeal because it has an impact on what happens to a young person outside of school when they are literally unprotected and have free access to it. But can I ask, do you think WhatsApp is social media?
Technically it is, apparently, but you are in control to a certain extent on who you're in contact with. WhatsApp isn't really randomly pushing you information, whereas any other like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, they don't use Facebook, but that's just, I always use the example of the killing of Charlie Kirk. Like, I would not have sought that out. I would not have looked for that at all. But on my social media, there it was presented to me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in my algorithm which would suggest that, I get things about calligraphy and, air fryer baking and all that sort of thing. It wouldn't have ended up like being in my algorithm, but I got it. I saw it. And with things like WhatsApp, that doesn't, I know that, obviously you get the occasional unsolicited message or incorrect message or whatever, but it's very, very rare. It wouldn't be daily. So I don't think that WhatsApp is. And I just wanted to come back, Carl, to the medical thing. There was, the science thing. There was an article in the British Medical Journal this week about doctors declaring social media use for young people a public health emergency. So I do think there is science. It might not be like the dopamine hit. It might not be kind of the chemical imbalance element of it, but the effects that it's having and the pressures that it's putting on places like CAMS and things like that were already, prior to social media, already a massively stretched service. Now we've got such a high number of people who inevitably are affected by their social media use. Though those services are ineffective. Kids are on waiting lists for 5 years, their entire educational time. And it's because there are things outside that we can try and do. I don't know if it's science based. I don't know. I don't know how we would quantify it, but I can't read the full article in the British Medical Journal, unfortunately, because I'm not a member. But it says, that Ofsted have got immediate powers to check schools' mobile phone policies, with schools expected to be phone-free by default. The potential ban on social media for under-16s follows Australia's introduction of a similar policy in December. France, Denmark and New Zealand are considering similar measures. Like, we're not talking about, it's not unique to us. It is an international problem.
Yeah. Okay, WhatsApp. Anybody else got a view? Because my view is that if you are proposing a ban on social media, I would argue that WhatsApp does have enough of the features of social media to be also included in the ban. And I know that Australia hasn't done that, and that's a source of discussion. And some would say, as you say, Liz, that WhatsApp is not algorithm driven, therefore content doesn't appear which you didn't necessarily ask for, but it nevertheless facilitates many of the other dangers that social media presents to young people in terms of a fear of missing out, a requirement that they are constantly in contact with one another, and also possibly, as we say, encouraging young people to stay indoors, or at least in an insular world rather than in a more real interactive world.
I don't
Do you know,
think it
when I was
counts, because if you're sorry, Lucy, because if you're going to say WhatsApp is social media based on that, then you have to then, like, you can set up group chats with your message, whatever your phone's default messaging service is, you can set up group chats there. So then if you're banning WhatsApp on the ground that it's social media, you might as well ban the whole smartphone, because as long as they can create a group chat, then you still have that particular problem. But I'm with Liz. I think the issue is algorithm based, and WhatsApp, I think WhatsApp is a reasonable compromise for students to still be able to, like, create school chats and friend chats and family chats and stay in touch that way and receive information back and forth that way without having all this external stuff forced on them that they never necessarily even searched for. I think that's the main issue. And you don't have the constant scrolling on the feed. It's the scrolling on the feed and the bitty information, and then it's the actual content that's being shown to them. I think those are the two main issues, not the group chat thing. I mean, we've had, before smartphones, we were in group chats on MSN Messenger and AOL and ICQ, and we had all these internet based, and those were like 10 years before any of the phone based group chats. And I feel like, yeah, it had, I mean, cyberbullying happened, that's for darn sure. There were some negatives, absolutely some negatives there, and people sharing photos, when she wasn't invited, like that, it still happens. But I just feel like WhatsApp is clearly in the other side. There's the algorithm based doom scrolling, and then there's the group chat type apps, and WhatsApp's over there. And I feel like if we ban those, that is going to cause a whole separate set of problems, and it's going to, like, that is a slippery slope. But the algorithm based doom scrolling apps are what need to go, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a difficult one because when my daughter was, I don't know, 12 or 13, I don't know if it was WhatsApp or what, but that was how but it was sort of before social media was something, I don't know, maybe we'd all decided not to let them have it. But anyway, that was what they communicated on. And there would still be that bullying element, because my daughter used to come down and say, so-and-so's just said, so-and-so, and I don't think that's very nice. And then I would say, well, I would leave it or whatever. So I guess you can't shield them from everything. When I was at school, my best friend Nikki, who lived around the corner from me, and I would go out all evening round the village on our roller skates or whatever, and then we would go home and we would write a letter to each other, like it is natural for young kids to want to contact. And she always used to start mine, yo, loose, and then there'd be all kinds of, honestly, it was so cute. And I've gotten somewhere, and then there'd be pictures and cartoons and, oh my God, Mikey's so handsome and stuff. Do you get what I mean? It was just daft, everything that came into your head, and then we'd swap letters. And, so kids have always wanted to be in control. And I guess that there were probably some kids who had nasty letters passed to them that they would have looked in their bags in the evening and found something mean. So you can't, those kinds of things probably have always existed, and, were much more public actually, because kids could be bitchy to your face, whereas now they don't have to. The same as a bloke doesn't have to, boyfriend doesn't have to tell you in person, really sorry, but that's the end of the relationship, and just send a message and off it goes, So it's that same kind of thing where it's removed that contact, that face-to-face contact. But I think that's already, I don't think WhatsApp should be banned.
Okay, it's an interesting one, because I have a feeling that we are heading for some kind of formal social media ban, or at least a heavy restriction on social media use for young people. But I also have a concern that what we will be doing in 2 or 3 years' time is having exactly the same conversation with almost the same arguments against other platforms that have emerged in a sort of, multi-headed Hydra approach, where tech has developed better versions of WhatsApp, better versions of other platforms that don't have some of the features that are in the legislation, but nevertheless are very harmful. Because I've seen plenty of bullying on WhatsApp in school, plenty of young people who have been made to feel really bad about themselves in WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is by no means a harmless platform as far as young people's interactions are concerned. And I think that there is a danger that I know, Ray, you called it a slippery slope. We have to make decisions about where we draw the line on lots of things. And we do make those decisions and constantly recalibrate them depending on our, judgment of the evidence and our consideration of how, much harm is being created and so on. But nevertheless, I have raise that question because I think there is a very real matter of deciding what is social media and what is not.
Yeah, where's the line?
And where is the line? Yeah. And also when you're doing that and you're defining it, that there is the potential for bad legislation insofar as it defines things in a way that is either easily, circumnavigated or is actually counterproductive. So that, I think, is why the government has decided not to immediately support the Lord's ban and instead take a 6-month consultation. And I think actually that approach is probably the right one. And I now will come out and say, I'm in favour of a ban. I am in favour of a ban. I know I put forward lots of arguments against, but that's not me. I'm just trying to offer a different view. I am in
It's
favour.
been good.
But I think that having said all of that, a ban is not a panacea. There are still dangers, and it's getting the legislation right and making it sufficiently flexible so that as new technology drives new platforms and new developments, the legislation is able to cope with that. Because for sure, I think we all agree, big technology companies like big food companies, their whole business model is premised on the basis of trying to get people keep coming back and consuming more and more and more.
Yeah.
And what you need is regulation to prevent that tendency, because they're companies, they want to make profits. That's their reason for being. And government and the state has a role in regulating. And for far too long, we've thrown out statements like the nanny state, oh, you can't control things, it'll be a nanny state and so on. When actually, in human history, we've always had to draw the line somewhere. We've always had to regulate, particularly with young people, because human nature is such that if you allow people complete unfettered access to something, then ultimately they will destroy themselves. They will become consumed by something which ultimately is not really in the best interests of wider society.
And there'll always be a workaround, I feel like. So keeping up with the legislation, and there's something like YouTube, like where does that fall? Because, that's a medium that, my son watches YouTube clips and things like that of things that he's interested in, obviously like a monitored version because I want to be in control of it. But is that considered social media? Because that's a way of pushing material to young people. Does there then become workarounds on things like that? And it's like, right, well, if we can't use this platform, we'll use this platform, or we'll create a new platform that doesn't meet that definition of social media, but we can still attract young people. It's a minefield, isn't it? And it's a very difficult one to combat. And we, like you say, Carl, we have to find a way. The government has to find a way to keep up with it.
Yeah, there's no legislation probably can't be perfect, and it can't cover everything and all possibilities. But I think that responsible government has to consider and reflect on the evidence enough. Having said that, I do think it's right that we act, and we act soon, because I don't think we can spend the next 2 or 3 years pondering the rights and wrongs of this and the evidence, and whether we're absolutely certain as to the long-term effects of it, because ultimately we feel as a society, I think, pretty uncomfortable with what's happening, not only with young people, but let's be frank, with adults as well. And I think the balance of power has moved too far towards the technology companies and too far away from the more responsible messaging that, you and I, Lucy, were subjected to with those little public information films back in the day, which actually, although they did scare us a little bit at times, they've lasted in the memory, and they came from a place of saying adults have to be adults and their job is to help society to actually negotiate the worst aspects of human nature and to bring out the best.
But you know what's interesting? Those adverts now, those ones that they would never ever dream of showing kids that. They would say they were harmful, the same as Ladybird fairy tales books. You know, they would have to be sanitized, and you would never have to see the end result, which was the boat, the sail, the mast hitting the pylons and things. And I think in some ways we're poorer for it, because I think that young people don't, they if you don't show them what they need to be scared of, they won't know. But in terms of having a consultation, now obviously I work in politics as a counsellor, and everything has a consultation, and very often consultation means very little. It's just something you have to do, and very often the questions are written in such a way that the outcome doesn't have to be dependent on what comes out of this. And I really hope that if they are having they will have a consultation on this, I very much hope that it will be a meaningful consultation and not just a tick box exercise to be able to rubber stamp a decision that's made. It really is important that this is a consultation that takes into account a range of different ideas and opinions. I think that the discussions, you're absolutely right, Liz, about YouTube. I hadn't even thought about YouTube. How does everything fit into this? How do we monitor what people can access? It's not going to be easy, and actually, but I can't, we can't be too hasty in this and then end up with a situation where it didn't work, or it looks like it's not going to work, and then it's completely pulled. And so, yeah, it's got to be done properly.
Wow.
Good place to finish.
Yeah, what a place to finish. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and joined in with us online. We're really appreciative of your engagement. Thank you, everybody, and have a lovely week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.